Hi everyone. Right, before we start, apologies for my croaky voice. I am losing it. Um, but in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the plant supports that I use in my garden. So don't be fooled by the fleeting sunshine. It's very cold here today in the northeast of England. Um, so here we are. I'm shooting this video on the 30th of March, but I would say up here in the north of England, anytime up until the middle of April is a good time to get your plant support, if not in place if you can, but at least start thinking about what you're going to use for plant supports now. And I'm just talking from experience because every single year I seem to miss the opportunity to get the plant supports in at the right time, and then the plants just, I mean, they're growing. It looks like 2 inches every day I come out. They've grown a bit more. Before you know it, you blink and the plant's up and you're sort of grappling in amongst the foliage trying to support it. Right, so I'm going to talk about the plant supports that I use, and any gardeners who need plant supports will know how expensive they are. So for anybody who is new to gardening, you firstly take into consideration what type of plants it is that you're growing that might need support. So obviously the tall ones. And secondly, you need to take into account how windy your garden is, how exposed it is. So I live here right on the northeast coast. So we have the sea over there and we have farmland over this way, the field out the back. And then over here, we have an equestrian centre. So it's just fields full of horses. And the wind just comes like a wind tunnel up this garden. So if you look back at some of my previous footage, you'll see in the growing season that a lot of my plants grow at a 45-degree angle because they're constantly being buffeted by the wind. And I came to realize very quickly living here, we've lived here for 15 years, that the worst wind seems to come in this direction. So that's south, that's west. So what is that? A southwesterly direction, like a wind tunnel, and it sweeps up this garden and all the plants grow like that. So over the years, I've used a number of different plant supports. So I've had these ones for years. I think you'd probably get something like this for about, I don't know, up here about £10. So it has these funny legs that you sort of, it's 3 legs for each plant support, and you sort of loop them in like that, right? And I'm going to use these on my peonies because the heads are so huge and fabulous that, particularly when it rains, which it does a lot in the UK, when it rains and then the wind blows, the peonies just become top heavy and they flop over. So this one here, I'll show you in a minute, but you see how tall it is? Well, probably 10 inches of that will go down into the soil. And then what you can do, so you can imagine it down, it's a bit awkward this, I haven't really thought this through, but say I start off down there, the peonies and these supports are straight into the ground, you've got to imagine that. Then as the peony grows, I can lift it like that. You can buy purpose-made peony supports and they are funnel shaped, but the thing to remember there is, because they're funnel shaped, look at how big your clump of peony is, because some of the funnels have a very small circumference, so some of them have a circumference no bigger than that. Now if your clump of peonies is this big, that the bottom of the funnel of your support, it's going to be no use. And they are very expensive. I was pricing them the other day and they were £30, and that was in the sale. So I'm just concentrating on shop bought things here at the moment. So I grow a lot of Crocosmia lucifer in my garden. So it's a bit awkward making this video because it's no good me waiting until the plants need supporting and then trying to get the support in and show you what I use. So all I can do now is show you what the plants look like now. And what you've got to imagine is in 2 weeks' time, these plants will be, I don't know, 2 foot tall. So I'll show you what Crocosmia lucifer looks like. So these are just the supports I used last year. So that is a patch there. And that is a patch there. And then over here, and then that is a patch under the tree, and it sort of goes all the way around here to, I can see it there. So this is the Crocosmia lucifer here. And it gets a really, really tall bladed leaf, about 4 foot tall. And then the flower comes up, which is bright red, and that can get 5 foot tall. And it looks very innocent there, doesn't it? Like, well, that's fine. That doesn't need a support. But what happens is it shoots up, so it gets this tall, and then it just gets buffeted in my garden by the wind, and it all flops forward. So when it does that, it flops, it grows up here, and it flops forward to about here, and it shades out everything else that's growing in this area. So all these primroses, the Shasta daisy, the sweet William, I've got Persicaria, Fats Domino down there, I've got a peony, that all gets buried underneath the foliage of the Crocosmia lucifer. So I have to put supports in place. Now you can see, so the supports that are in there are these ones, which I've had for years. They're quite tall. But then, yes, last year I bought some smaller ones. Now, where are the small ones? I bought this size one. You see the difference? And actually, the smaller ones worked better for the Crocosmia lucifer and made the plant look more natural when it was supported than the tall ones. Because let's pretend that these are the stems of the Crocosmia lucifer and it's up here, right, before it's flopped over. Now, if I put this plant support in there, like that, I would only have about that much leaf above the support. Can you imagine that? So what happens is it makes the plant stand up very tall like that, very rigid, which is not the look that I like in my garden. I don't want to be able to see the plant support. That's the art of it. You're trying to support the plant without actually seeing the support. So what I found instead was these shorter ones. So you've got to imagine they go down into the soil about 4 inches, and they support the plant much lower down. So what happens is it's not going to flop forward. It doesn't flop forward because I used it on those patches. It grows up, but then it grows out and it's supported at that level down there rather than up here where it has to stand to attention. Then I've got some really quite delicate little ones, really teeny weeny ones. And these would be good for supporting, let's have a think, anything like an Achillea or something like that, where you get quite low foliage, which would bury the support, and then the flower comes up above that. So they would work very well with that, for that. Then I have these plastic supports, which I bought last year. And I mean, these were ridiculously cheap. I think they were like £1.99 or something, or even 99 pence. 3 legs go around like this. They make a hoop, and you put your hoop down there. And you know what I used this for last year? A lupin, a small lupin. So the points go down into the ground like that. That's your ground, and your plant grows up through that. And actually they worked really well. They would be no good for a lucifer, any sort of robust plant like that. So your big supports, plant supports, they're as awkward to corral as a garden hose. You're just getting such a mess. These big ones here would support my delphiniums. They would support big clumps of phlox. Oxeye daisy, they would support that, but you know I would be tempted with the oxeye daisy because it goes so tall to use that size support for them. So I'll take you around now and I'll show you the 2 clumps of peony roses that I'm going to use these round supports on. Right, so these are the 2 clumps of Sarah Bernhardt peonies. 1 clump there and 1 clump there. And you can see I've tried to support it with this little plastic one, which didn't work, but once the plant grew, I couldn't get that back out again. So again, they just look so innocent there, don't they? It's like, I'm not going to grow big and unruly. So I've got a really big clump there and a slightly smaller clump there, but I know from experience that they're both very large when they flower. It's like trying to herd cats. The legs keep falling off. Not the cats, the plant support. Right, so I'm just going to go, because these peonies tend to flop this way onto the path, I need to get it sort of centralized. I found out from experience, don't just press one leg in as far as you can, because that makes the other 2 really hard to get in. Oh yes, these shop bought metal ones are very expensive. And for that reason, I'm going to discuss 3 different types of plant support that I use in my garden. So over the years, I've collected the coated metal ones. You can get them where they're uncoated and they're quite rusty if that's the look you're going for. I'm going to talk about homemade plant supports, and then I'm going to show you the very natural supports that I've had for years, which are all tree branches. Right, and whilst I was getting the plant supports out the garage, I found this and I was thinking, goodness, what is that? Does that go like that? And then I remembered what I did with this. So it's quite strong mesh, and you can just pop it on your soil like that and the plants will grow up through it. If you wanted, you could sort of bury it in. What I find is, even in a windy garden, once the foliage is through, say so I use this to grow big clumps of Crocosmia lucifer through, and what I found was once the leaves came through, this doesn't move anymore, it just supports them. So I've got, I didn't use this actual bit, I've used a much bigger bit. I'll take you around the front and I'll show you where that is. Right, so if we walk into this border over here, you see that mesh there? Just an arch of mesh with sort of dead brown leaves coming up the middle. So that is, that is the old Crocosmia lucifer leaves from last year. And the plant will just grow up through there. Right, so the other thing that I want to talk about is a homemade plant support. And I don't know how this one's going to work out this year because my husband has just knocked it together for me. So we had a trip up to Edinburgh Botanical Gardens last year, and what I noticed was that their herbaceous border was beautiful and nothing was flopping over, but you couldn't see the plant support. So being nosy, I was having a rummage through some of the foliage without damaging the plants, and I noticed that they had little wooden structures like this, but on a much bigger scale, with this mesh, this plastic mesh over the top, and they were hammered down into the soil so that they were only about that tall, and they were right along the herbaceous border. And all the plants, the phlox, the Crocosmia, the Monarda, everything, the daisies, they were all growing up through this mesh. Now, obviously I couldn't see how big their mesh was. So we've just bought this one from a local garden centre, and I'll show you where I'm going to put this one. So I'll show you where this one is going to go, but just before that I'll show you this beautiful peony. This is a deep red one, and I know from experience that he doesn't need supporting, funnily enough. His stems are really, really tough and straight, and I think it's because the flower is more sort of cup shaped like that size, rather than the Sarah Bernhardt ones, which are much more open, the flower, and they're sort of this size. So this is a really problematic area with this Crocosmia lucifer in that corner. So I love it there. It gives a lot of structure, and it sort of marries it sort of disguises the two bricks. Where the staircase is built out, it sort of disguises that join. It's full sun, it's south facing, so this Crocosmia loves it here and grows accordingly. I did this border all out last year, so there is a video, I'll put a link to it. But this Crocosmia grows up and then it falls forward, it swamps over the peony. There was a rose there that I had to dig out. The rose was always covered up by it. I've planted lupins now. I've planted lupins and foxgloves and amimajus and a very tall white campanula. There are delphiniums there. There is a Christmas rose. There's Spirea, achillea. And it will all be in vain if I don't manage to keep the Crocosmia lucifer from falling forward. One year I actually put a string around him. You can see the remains of the string there, actually. This string. And I had it tied to the railings there. Anyway, so my husband has made me this. And the support, I'm trying not to damage the peony. It's so difficult, isn't it? As I say, this is why you have to start getting the supports in now. So the support is going to go there, and he's going to hammer it down so that it's only about this tall. Remember what I said about the metal supports around there? If I left it that tall, the plants would grow up, they would be supported, but you'd see all of this, and you don't want that. So I'm really hoping this works. Obviously all the other foliage, this peony is going to get luscious leaves and that, and all the other foliage will grow and hide this. I might actually paint this with a bit of fence paint, either dark green or I think I've got a tin of brown. So he's going to go in there. So that was scrap wood that apparently he had in the garage. And I think the mesh was, we've got a great big roll for a tenner or something. So you can imagine if I wanted to, I could have had one made right the way along here. And if I had all phlox and everything growing in there, it would all grow up through this mesh. That's what it was like at Edinburgh Botanical Gardens. I wonder if there's anybody from the Botanical Gardens watching this. They'll be saying, no, I wasn't. I was much better than that. Right, so the next thing that I use as plant support, which you may or may not have thought of doing, and again, this is only the things that I use in my garden. So we used to have a huge London plane tree over there, and these are the lovely branches of it. So if you can see there, again, it looks very innocent now, just this clump of Crocosmia lucifer, but that is actually a really big clump when it is full height, and that flops right the way forward. I really am going to do this border out this year. It grows up here, this tall. Let's see whether, hope you can see, it grows right up here, and then it just all falls forward, and everything in this vicinity, the phlox, the geraniums, everything is in shade and covered up. So you can see I've put an old tree stump there to try and stand it up, but that was useless. So I find that these branches work really well because they're organic, it's very natural, might look messy for a little while, like this time of year before the plants have grown. I like these because the twigs sort of grow upwards, which will support that. But the way I like to put it in is this way. So it's sort of growing against the stem. And I do this every year and nobody notices. They notice this time of the year. They'll say, oh, what's that shrub? And I'll say, it's not a shrub, it's just an old tree branch. And it's my plant support. Got a beautiful rose there, it'll support that rose too. So yeah, it's as easy as that. You just lie it in like that, and the plant grows up through it, and then you can no longer see it. And I'll show you another huge clump of Crocosmia lucifer in this corner. So that's my magnolia tree growing up there, and I've got two big clumps of Crocosmia at the base. So I just pop this branch in this way, and you can imagine that's a brilliant plant support. You know, whichever way the leaves grow up through that, it's going to support it. So I just tuck it right in like that. Magnolia branch back out. And then the Crocosmia grows up there, and in front of it I've got Alstroemeria, I've got Iris, I've got Veronicastum alba, which grows really, really tall. And you can't see the branch any longer. Actually, I'm going to move that there because I think that is the Veronicastum coming through there. Right, get out this border. And I am going to plant lupins in there. I think I'll plant a lot of lupins there. So there we are. It's warming up a bit now. In fact, I'm too warm. Just before I go, I would mention obviously the need for plant supports in your garden depends on how windy your garden is. So, for instance, my mother in law lives one street back, it just runs parallel with our street here, and it's like a different part of the town when I go around the corner. Um, she is completely sheltered in her garden. And then I come back around here and it's like a hurricane. So you might not need as many plant supports as I need. And the other thing is, if you really don't have any plant supports, can't get any, or you just don't want to use any plant supports, you can do what we call the Chelsea chop on your perennials. So that works really well on phlox, on monarda, on oxeye daisy, any big perennials that grow about this tall. It's in May. It's the week of the Chelsea Flower Show. That's why they call it the Chelsea Chop. It's just a good reminder to people. And you can take off about, well, some people take half the plant back down. They just chop it in half. Or I tend to stagger mine and take about 10 inches off the top of each plant. And what that does is it sets the plant back a bit. Instead of just putting all its energy in and growing really fast and tall as quickly as possible and then setting flower, because you've chopped the stems in half, it sort of stops it growing for a bit, and it'll grow back, but it won't grow back as tall, and it'll grow back stronger and bushier, because usually when you do the snip at the top of the stem, it makes it bush out. So once the plant has had the Chelsea chop, then it's a much stronger plant, and you might not need to stake it at all. So that's it. I can't think of any shrubs that would need support. It's really the herbaceous perennials in my garden that need the support. And some of them, like the Amimagus, which grows 5-6 foot tall, that's an annual. I just make sure I plant that kind of plant amongst trees and hedges and supports that are already there, and I like it to sort of flop into the other plants, and it uses them as its support. So I'll put a link to a video where I talk about Amimagus as well. So I hope you found this video useful. I would urge you, start thinking about your plant supports, get out there if at all possible and get the plant supports in. As I say, I've never done that. I think this year is the first year where I'm going to be really on it, and that's only because I've got a camera focused on me. So until next time, happy gardening. Bye bye.